beer, wine, whiskey. Most people think drinking is a modern problem, something created by cities, bars, and civilization. It isn't. Your ancestors were probably intoxicated long before civilization even existed. In fact, some scientists believe alcohol didn't simply accompany civilization. It may have helped create it. Not metaphorically, literally. Beer may be older than bread. And the strangest part is this. Your brain may have evolved to crave alcohol millions of years before humans ever learned how to brew it. Which means the feeling you get after a drink could be ancient, older than farming, older than written history, possibly even older than humanity itself. Once you understand this story, human evolution begins to look completely different. Because ancient humans weren't simply drinking once in a while. For enormous stretches of history, alcohol became part of everyday survival. But none of that started in a village, or a brewery, or even the first farm. It started in a jungle floor covered with fallen fruit. About 10 million years ago, long before modern humans existed, ripe fruit regularly dropped from the trees and baked under the tropical sun. As wild yeast fed on the fruit's natural sugars, something extraordinary happened. Alcohol appeared automatically. Nature was brewing long before humans knew brewing existed. Then evolution did something no one expected. Our primate ancestors developed a genetic mutation that made them dramatically better at digesting ethanol, the alcohol created through fermentation. Scientists studying human origins eventually traced this adaptation to a digestive enzyme known as ADH4. At first, the discovery made almost no sense. Why would evolution care about alcohol? Who was drinking millions of years before civilization? The answer wasn't beer, it wasn't wine, it wasn't whiskey, it was rotten fruit. Researchers realized that fruit lying on the forest floor often contained more accessible calories than fruit still hanging on the trees. Fermentation had already begun breaking those sugars down, turning fallen fruit into an unusually valuable food source. Even more importantly, ethanol released a powerful scent. In dense tropical forests where visibility was limited, that smell acted like a natural beacon, helping primates locate ripe, energy-rich food more quickly. Those that tolerated ethanol found food faster. They spent less energy searching. And when food became scarce, that small advantage could mean the difference between survival and extinction. Generation after generation, natural selection quietly rewarded those individuals, until the ability to process alcohol became part of our evolutionary history. Think about what that really means. One of the reasons your ancestors survived may be because they were exceptionally good at eating fermented fruit from the jungle floor. That sounds unbelievable. But the evidence suggests your relationship with alcohol stretches back millions of years. And yet somehow the story becomes even stranger. At first, humans simply found alcohol. Eventually they learned how to make it. Most people believe civilization began because humans wanted reliable food supplies. Bread, agriculture, permanent settlements. That explanation still makes perfect sense. But some archaeologists believe another motivation may have quietly shaped human history alongside it. Beer. Beer. As surprising as it sounds, one hypothesis suggests humans may have begun farming partly because they wanted a dependable supply of fermented drinks. The idea remains debated, but the evidence is fascinating. At an archaeological site called Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey, researchers uncovered enormous stone pillars built more than 11,000 years ago. They were constructed before cities, before kingdoms, before writing, before anything we normally recognize as civilization. Even more astonishing, hunter-gatherers somehow organized hundreds of people to quarry, transport, and raise stones weighing as much as 20 tons. That raises an extraordinary question. How did people persuade so many individuals to work together without governments, permanent rulers, or organized states? Then archaeologists uncovered massive carved stone basins near the site. Some researchers believe these basins may have been used for early brewing techniques, producing primitive beer for large communal gatherings, although the interpretation is still debated. If that idea is correct, the implications are enormous. Shared feasts filled with fermented drinks may have encouraged strangers to gather, cooperate, celebrate, and return again and again. Civilization may not have emerged only because humans wanted to eat together. It may also have grown because they wanted to drink together. And if alcohol really helped bring people together before civilization existed, its greatest influence was only beginning. If alcohol helped bring people together, that alone would make it one of the most influential substances in human history. But its impact went far beyond social gatherings, because alcohol didn't just help build communities. For thousands of years, It may have helped keep those communities alive. Think about what alcohol actually does to the human brain. It lowers fear. It builds trust. It encourages conversation. It makes strangers feel familiar. It strengthens social bonds and turns shared experiences into shared memories. In other words, it naturally encourages many of the exact behaviors required for large groups of people to cooperate. Whether beer truly came before bread is still debated, but one fact is far less controversial. Once humans discovered fermentation, alcohol became deeply woven into the fabric of civilization. And then it solved a problem almost impossible for us to imagine today. Safe drinking water. Today, clean water feels ordinary. You turn on a faucet, fill a glass, take a drink. You rarely stop to wonder whether it might kill you. For most of human history, people had no such certainty. A clear stream could carry parasites. A quiet pond could be filled with harmful bacteria. A single contaminated water source could spread disease through an entire community. Ancient people didn't know why it happened. They knew nothing about microbes, nothing about bacteria, nothing about viruses. They only noticed a pattern. Some drinks made people sick, others didn't. Over countless generations, they stumbled onto an accidental discovery. Fermented drinks were often safer than untreated water. The brewing process created conditions that made it difficult for many dangerous pathogens to survive. Boiling, fermentation, increasing acidity, and even small amounts of alcohol all helped make these drinks more stable. Ancient people never understood the science. They didn't need to. Experience taught them which liquids were usually safer to drink. That simple observation may have saved millions of lives. Suddenly, alcohol was no longer just something people enjoyed. It became something they depended on, which completely changes the way we think about drinking in the ancient world. They weren't constantly drinking because they wanted to celebrate. Very often, they were drinking because it was simply the safer choice. Slowly, almost without anyone noticing, alcohol stopped being a luxury. It became part of everyday survival. By the Middle Ages, weak beer was consumed across much of Europe every single day. Children often drank small beer with breakfast because its alcohol content was extremely low and it was frequently safer than local water supplies. Workers drank it while building roads, churches, castles, and entire cities. In ancient Egypt, beer became so important that laborers building the pyramids were paid partly with daily beer rations. Some estimates suggest they consumed several liters every day. Imagine helping build one of humanity's greatest monuments while being mildly intoxicated from sunrise until sunset. To us, that sounds almost unbelievable. To them, it was completely normal, because in many places, sober water posed a greater risk than weak beer. That single fact transformed alcohol into something much bigger than a drink. It became infrastructure. Civilization itself quietly ran on fermentation. But there's one detail most people never realize. The alcohol our ancestors depended on looked almost nothing like the alcohol we drink today. And that difference changes the story once again. When people imagine ancient drinking, they often picture crowds stumbling through villages, completely drunk. The archaeological evidence tells a very different story. Most ancient beer was surprisingly weak. Many varieties contained only a small amount of alcohol. They were thick, cloudy, packed with grains, nutrients, and calories. In some cultures, the drink was so dense that people used long straws to avoid the floating husks on the surface. These beverages resembled fermented grain soup far more than modern beer. Even so, drinking them every day still shaped human behavior. Now picture daily life 5,000 years ago. No painkillers, no anesthesia, no antibiotics. Predators still hunted nearby. A minor injury could become fatal. Every day demanded relentless physical labor. Every season brought uncertainty. Under those conditions, even a mild intoxicant could ease pain, soften fear, and make an unimaginably difficult life just a little easier to endure. Humans didn't become attached to alcohol overnight. That relationship formed slowly, generation after generation, until fermented drinks became inseparable from everyday existence. And once something becomes part of everyday life, it rarely remains ordinary for long. Once alcohol became part of everyday life, something remarkable began to happen. People stopped seeing it as simply another drink. They began to see it as something sacred. Across the ancient world, intoxication felt mysterious. A single drink could change emotions, dissolve fear, inspire confidence, and alter the way people experienced reality itself. To civilizations that had no understanding of chemistry or neuroscience, that transformation seemed almost supernatural. It felt like a gift from the gods. Few cultures embraced that idea more completely than the Sumerians. Among the earliest civilizations in recorded history, beer was so important that they created an entire goddess devoted to it. Her name was Ninkasi. Even more remarkable, one of the oldest surviving beer recipes in history wasn't preserved inside a cookbook. It was hidden inside a religious hymn, a prayer doubled as a brewing guide. Think about what that means. One of humanity's earliest written documents wasn't just recording history. It was preserving the knowledge of how to make beer. That alone reveals how deeply alcohol had become woven into civilization. It wasn't only consumed, it was celebrated, protected, honored, passed from one generation to the next. Beer accompanied festivals, religious ceremonies, community gatherings, daily meals, for thousands of years. Alcohol appeared to unite people far more often than it divided them. But every powerful discovery comes with a hidden cost, and alcohol was no exception. The same substance that strengthened communities could also quietly damage them. No civilization demonstrates that contradiction more clearly than ancient Rome. Wine flowed through nearly every part of Roman life. Politicians drank, soldiers drank, merchants drank, workers drank, families gathered around it. Religious rituals included it. Political negotiations unfolded over it. To the Romans, wine wasn't a luxury. It was part of civilization itself. Yet hidden inside much of that wine was a danger they could neither see nor understand. Lead. Many Roman winemakers prepared sweet syrups by heating grape juice in lead vessels or storing wine in lead containers. The process made the wine taste sweeter. No one realized it was also contaminating it. Modern researchers continue to debate exactly how widespread the damage became, but many suspect that generations of chronic lead exposure contributed to mood disorders, infertility, cognitive decline, and other long-term health problems among parts of the Roman elite. Some historians have even suggested that lead poisoning may have subtly influenced political decision-making or weakened portions of Roman society. The evidence remains debated, but the possibility is impossible to ignore. It reminds us of something deeply unsettling. For thousands of years, humans continued experimenting with alcohol without understanding what it was actually doing to the brain. They didn't know why people became addicted. They didn't understand long-term neurological damage. They couldn't explain why alcohol comforted some people while destroying others. They simply knew it had become impossible to imagine life without it. And in many ways, that hasn't changed. Empires collapsed. Religions transformed. Currencies disappeared. Entire civilizations faded into history. Alcohol remained. Again and again, every new society rediscovered it, embraced it, and built traditions around it. That persistence raises an uncomfortable question. Why has alcohol survived every major civilization humanity has ever created? Perhaps the answer isn't hidden in culture alone. Perhaps it's buried much deeper, inside the human brain itself, within ancient reward systems shaped millions of years before modern society ever existed, long before agriculture, long before cities, possibly even before our own species evolved. If those ancient survival systems once helped our ancestors find food, what would happen after humans learned how to make alcohol stronger than anything nature had ever produced? That discovery would change drinking forever. For most of human history, getting drunk wasn't easy. Fermentation took time. The alcohol it produced was relatively weak. Reaching a state of heavy intoxication required patience, large quantities, and often an entire gathering of people. Then humanity made a discovery that changed everything. Distillation. Instead of simply allowing yeast to create alcohol, people learned how to concentrate it. The result was unlike anything our ancestors had experienced before. Suddenly, alcohol became dramatically stronger. Now intoxication could happen faster, with smaller amounts, and with far more powerful effects. For millions of years, evolution had prepared the human brain to encounter naturally fermented fruit. It had never prepared us for distilled spirits. That single invention transformed alcohol from an ancient survival tool into something entirely different. Entire economies grew around it. Governments taxed it. Merchants carried it across continents. Empires traded it alongside spices, precious metals, and silk. In some regions, alcohol became so valuable that it helped finance wars and expand global trade. By the Industrial Revolution, production exploded. Breweries became factories, distilleries became industries, alcohol became cheaper, stronger, and available on a scale humanity had never seen before. Yet despite all those changes, people continued treating drinking as something perfectly natural. Perhaps because, in one important way, it always had been. For millions of years, fermentation surrounded the lives of our ancestors. Rotting fruit, fermented honey, naturally occurring ethanol, primitive mead, Sumerian beer. ancient brewing. Alcohol wasn't something humans invented from nothing. Nature invented it first. Humans simply learned how to produce more of it than nature ever could. And that realization leads to a disturbing possibility. Maybe humans were never truly meant to resist alcohol. Maybe what feels like a modern temptation is actually an ancient survival instinct meeting a modern world. Evolution prepared us to occasionally discover fermented fruit on a jungle floor. It did not prepare us for supermarket shelves lined with liquor, for industrial distilleries producing millions of bottles, for bars open every night, for spirits stronger than anything our ancestors could have imagined. Our biology changed slowly. Our technology changed almost overnight. And perhaps that gap explains why alcohol remains one of the most powerful substances in human history. Which brings us back to where this story began. Not inside a brewery, not inside a tavern, not even inside the first farming village. Back to a tropical forest. Back to fallen fruit quietly fermenting beneath the trees, long before cities existed, long before writing, long before recorded history. Nature was already producing alcohol. Then one unusual primate learned to recognize its scent, to follow it, to tolerate it, eventually, to recreate it. That primate was us. We built rituals around drinking, religions around drinking, trade around drinking, economies around drinking, civilizations around drinking. Even today, the pattern is strangely familiar. A group of people gathers together. Someone pours a fermented drink. Stories begin. Laughter follows. Trust grows. Connections are formed. The surroundings have changed. The instinct has not. Perhaps the most unsettling realization of all is this. For most of human history, people didn't see alcohol as dangerous. They saw it as ordinary, useful, necessary, sometimes even sacred. For countless generations, fermented drinks were associated with survival far more often than addiction. Which means the real mystery isn't why humans learned to drink. The real mystery is whether a species shaped by millions of years of living alongside fermentation could ever completely leave it behind. Because somewhere deep inside your brain, ancient neural pathways are still carrying echoes of a tropical forest that disappeared millions of years ago. They don't know what whiskey is. They don't know what vodka is. They don't know what a modern bar looks like. They remember only one thing. The smell of fermentation once meant food. It once meant calories. It once meant survival. And perhaps that is why, after millions of years of human history, that ancient instinct is still waiting to be awakened.